There's one more thing we need to talk about to set you up for your Flipgrid discussion, as well as for the last two articles of this week. And that is the cover song phenomenon. So in this era of the 1950s, copyright law was enforced in quite a lax manner, or was even non-existent. So because of that, you saw all sorts of practices of artists covering one another's songs. Today we do have song covers, but usually they would be done with legal clearance and a share of the royalties going to the original songwriter. Not so much in the 1950s. It was more of a sort of Wild West zone where people could get money paid to them for covering a song that was completely written by someone else, and the original might not ever see a cent. So it was pretty common for white artists to cover songs that were originally written or recorded by black artists. These covers would present black songs and musical style in more whitewashed ways, just sandblasting some of the more distinctive or expressive elements of the black artist's original music, and present this whitewashed version to appeal to white audiences. In the Spotify playlist for this week, you'll see several pairs that show examples of this process. Now, this did have some positive impact in the sense that it developed a demand, a market for black music and black musicians. So when credit was given, or when listeners would trace back the trail of the cover song to its original, it might bolster some of the reputation or the attention to an artist like Fats Domino. However, on the whole, the cover song phenomenon was detrimental to black artists, and this is because of systemic racism that was embedded in the record industry. So here's how it would work. White artists and white DJs would typically profit at black artists and songwriters' expense. For example, artists such as Pat Boone or Elvis Presley would frequently be asked by their producers to cover popular songs by black artists, such as Ain't That a Shame by Fats Domino or Hound Dog by Big Mama Thornton. However, once they had made these covers, the white audiences and just the larger share of DJs and radio listening audience would then prefer the white artist cover over the black artist original, even to the point where sometimes the black artist original has faded into obscurity because of the popularity of the cover, such as Big Mama Thornton's Hound Dog. Now, in this whitewashing process, I should note that the covers often would sanitize or whitewash the more sexual or social justice themes that were contained within the original songs. Again, Hound Dog is another example of this. Now, as a case study of what these strategies in the industry could be like, consider the exploitation of Chuck Berry's career. So Chuck Berry, when he was starting out and starting to gain popularity, was presented with what was called a standard contract by the DJs, by Alan Freed in particular, who were playing his music. This standard contract was encoded in legal terminology and just all sorts of things that Chuck Berry couldn't necessarily decode. And so when he signed this contract, he was in effect signing away his mechanical, writers, performance, and publishing royalties, all for just one single flat payment. As a comparison, this would be like a movie star today signing away all their rights to future profits and royalties from a successful film, and being paid instead just like a $10,000 lump sum contract right now. So when Chuck Berry started to receive surprisingly small royalty checks for his music being played, he noticed that the DJs, Alan Freed and Russ Fratto, were listed as co-composers on his hit song, Maybelline. And so this was something that he had been aware of, but he didn't realize that it meant that Freed and Fratto were going to take a cut of the royalties. In fact, they actually took an even split, so he was only getting a third of the royalties that he should have been getting from his music, and the other 2/3 were going to Freed and to Fratto. And so examples like this illustrate how powerful white men, such as those in the DJ's position or the producer's position, like Alan Freed, could draw on the resources of black musicians and artists in order to keep themselves ultimately in a position of influence. Now, another factor that I mentioned previously is that, especially in the segregated South, oftentimes a black artist's original version of a song could not be aired on the radio, whether that be from censoring the content or just the fact that it was a black musician. However, a white artist's cover version usually could be, and often was. And so the rock scholar Glenn Altshuler describes how DJs would often wait for white cover artists such as Pat Boone or Elvis Presley to release a new cover of a new black artist song to start playing it on the radio. And in this way, it would divert profits from black artists to white artists. Now, throughout Chuck Berry's later life and career, because of how he had been burned by the music industry's systemic racism, he remained suspicious towards the industry as a whole, and then primarily focused his efforts on playing live shows and insisting to be paid in cash up front for those gigs before he would ever go on stage. So he basically said, no more contracts, no more royalties, no more mechanical rights or co-composer ownership. I just want to be paid a certain amount to play a show at this venue for this many people. And Chuck Berry wasn't the only one affected in this way. In fact, his experience is pretty standard for black rock and roll musicians in the era, including Little Richard, including Fats Domino, and many, many more. Alright, so I know that was a lot of information, but I hope that that sets you up with a good broad outline to understand this week's material, situated in its historical, social, and yes, racialized context. Bye-bye for now.